first step was to weigh down all the parts and let them sit for a couple of hours to make sure that everything lays nice and flat. Foam Tack and Foam Safe CA are the glues that we're going to be using during this build, and to make sure that we don't glue anything to the table, we're going to put down some wax paper. Starting with our wing, we have to join the two halves together using our Foam Tack, making sure that this joint is nice and strong. Next, we install these carbon fiber supports which get placed into pre-cut channels in the foam. I'm simply filling in the slot with some thin Foam Safe CA and then pressing the carbon fiber down into place. Here we have a nice sheet of plastic parts where we're going to get our aileron control horns from. Using the included hardware, we're going to pop in these nice quick connect linkages for our push rods. With two of these assembled, we're going to go ahead and glue them in place. And since this plane is made out of thin EPP foam, it needs quite a bit of support. So we are gluing in these standoffs on the ailerons to be able to install some carbon fiber rods. The only thing left for the wing for right now is removing the spot for the aileron servos. Moving on to the elevator, we first need to assemble the full flying stabilizer mechanism. That's right, full stabs on this thing. To do so, we need to take this carbon tube and slide on all of these plastic pieces, in order like so. This then gets lined up with all of the marked areas on the elevator and the fuselage to then be glued into place where needed. This part does take a little bit to get everything in the right position, so just have a little patience, and once everything's lined up correctly, we can apply our glue to the areas that call for it, making sure not to get glue in a place that would cause this whole thing to bind up. More carbon fiber into the pre-cut channels to help stiffen up the fuselage a bit, both for the horizontal part of the fuselage and the lower vertical part of the fuselage. Once that was done, it was time to lay a solid bead of foam tack to glue the lower portion of the fuselage into place. I also decided to go over the joint with some thin CA just to make sure that everything was solid. Throughout this plane, we will have these carbon rods helping add structure to the plane. Again, these are all pre-cut to size and go into pre-cut slots, which makes this process super easy. Along with these two thicker pieces of carbon that we're going to install, these will become our landing gear. Next, we open up our bag of electronics because we need to get our servos centered and ready to install. Using my servo tester, I was able to get all four of these ready to go in no time at all. Our servos need a linkage, so next is assembling our push rods. Now these are pieces of carbon fiber that we glue and heat shrink a bent piece of metal to. This is also where I found out that foam tack is flammable. Noted. Fireworks show over, we can now glue our elevator servo into place. Our push rod here is supported by 4 plastic braces that get glued into place as well. Flipping the plane over for the first time, we get to install our second servo, which is going to be for our rudder. The last piece of our fuselage is the upper half of it. Again, laying down a good bead of foam tack and aligning the tabs with their holes, making sure again to keep everything straight and square with the rest of the plane. A few more supports are needed, including a couple in the front by the cockpit and one on each side in the back by the vertical stabilizer. Installing our rudder push rod is similar to our elevator. It's supported by 4 more plastic braces which are glued into place and leading to the back of the airplane. Now before we attach our wing, we have to glue in our 2 aileron servos and connect them with our push rods. Now these quick connectors make it really easy to set the push rods to the right spot and are simply tightened down by a screw. Finally, it was time to put our wing on. I laid down a healthy amount of foam tack and set the fuselage into place, securing it with yet another bead of thin CA and doing everything to ensure that it was level. These carbon fiber rods will act as our wing struts, adding 2 on each side, adding much needed strength to the wing. Now this is a bush plane, so we need some bush tires. These also took a little bit of assembly, but went together relatively easy, as well as the axles and joints to attach them to the landing gear. Once again, just using some thin CA to secure everything in place. Now our last piece of the airframe is our rudder, joined by some more foam tack, and at the same time attaching our rudder push rod to the control horn. Installing the motor was definitely something different than what I'm used to. The motor mount itself is glued into place, but then it's strengthened by 4 small carbon fiber rods that are inserted through each corner into the foam. The motor is then mounted using 4 screws and connected to our ESC, which is going to be mounted right here on the side of the fuselage using double-sided foam tape. Quick test of all of our control surfaces, make sure that nothing is binding up, and some final adjustments on the push rod so everything sits where it needs to be. On to our final steps, we're going to install our propeller. Now this is installed using what's called a prop saver. It's literally just an O-ring, but using the screwdriver method, it's easy to install and it actually works great. And finally, laying down some Velcro on the top here allows us to adjust our battery location in case we need to adjust our center of gravity.